Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Erin Gruwell, and I'd like to welcome you to our first of three lives today. Today is Giving Tuesday, the International Global Day of Radical Giving. So, you've all made it through the holidays. You've made it through Black Friday shopping. You've made it through Cyber Monday. And so, Giving Tuesday was created about a dozen years ago in earnest to get people to reflect and to give of their time, but more importantly, to give of their treasure to help nonprofits like the Freedom Writers Foundation do the good work that we do. So today we are asking our friends, our colleagues, our family members, our supporters, and our new friends to join us throughout the day to learn a little bit about our story. And to do so, we're calling today 30 for 30. You can do the math, it will age me. But 30 years ago, I found myself in a classroom with these amazing students. And there was a moment where everything stopped so that everything could start yet again. That moment was a note. That moment was a racial reckoning. And that moment allowed myself and the amazing students I taught, belovedly referred to as freedom writers, to put down a fist, to put down a gun, to pick up a pen, and to write what needs to be written. And they've been doing it for 30 years. So today is that celebration. And so throughout the day, I have some live guests who are going to help tell us our story. And while you're watching, and if you are inspired, there's a QR code on the screen. Please feel free to give $30 for 30 for Thursday. 30 for 30. And what that means is think about the things you could give up for a week. Maybe you are working from home this week so you don't have to get gas. Maybe you don't go to Starbucks as much and get those frappuccinos. Maybe this week you do cereal and not a dozen eggs. Think about $30 for 30 for 30. And throughout this live, I'm going to be announcing some of the amazing folks who've joined us who might be giving live and in real time. I see that Bill Fever is on the call, and Bill Fever not only gave 30 for 30, Bill Fever gave 50. Bill Fever gave 50 for 30. Bill Fever, the Silver Fox himself, was the first original freedom writer teacher that I met in 2005, and he's been part of the family ever since. So thank you, Bill, for giving of your time and your talent and supporting our cause. I love it. So I feel like I'm gonna have to reveal something. Someone is behind the scenes, ready to put their beautiful face on the screen. You actually see him, unbeknownst to you. If you look over my shoulder this way, you could see his beautiful face on the cover of our book. Um, Tony Becerra, Mauricio Becerra, has been a part of our Freedom Writer family from the very beginning. And so to help us with this incredible 30 for 30 live, Tony's going to be joining me now at 3 o'clock. Carlos is going to be joining me, 3 o'clock Pacific time. And at 6 o'clock, Melvin Logan is going to be joining me. So it is like the boy band. And you'll see Tony throughout the day. Maybe he'll pop his head back in. But we're going to have like a boy band today, taking you on a little journey. And so if you're a teacher, feel free to share with your class. If you are a voracious reader, feel free to share with your book club. If you are a parent and you just need inspiration that things can and will get better with your teens, Tony is going to be a testament that things can and will get better. Right, pretty Tony?
Yes, absolutely.
And if you are a student, wherever you may be, hopefully you're in school right now, so you're not watching this without your teacher's permission. But with the Freedom Writer model, we are in dozens of countries and time zones. So my hope is that throughout this morning, we might have some of our incredible guests joining us from places like the Middle East, Europe, New Zealand. We've got teachers in continents, countries, and cities across the globe. So what I want to do is I want to dive in and introduce Tony. On the screen, you could see an enlarged Freedom Writers Diary with Tony on my screen. and in large Freedom Writers Diary in Tony's screen. And Tony, what I'd like to ask you is, what is it like to be an ordinary person and suddenly you are filling up screens with your face, book covers, documentaries, and feature films? What is it like to be an ordinary kid with such an extraordinary opportunity to have your story not just be part of our story, but the lexicon of so many libraries and schools and nations?
I mean, it's it's pretty special, I think, and I think people sometimes people are surprised when we show up and we're not kids. Like they expect like 18-year-olds to show up, and we have to tell them like, well, I mean, we that was a long time ago, and we keep growing, so we're adults now. We have families now, and we're grown, and it just feels pretty special because I feel like most of us have that feeling like we have this obligation to give back. Um, a lot of people are also surprised that we're still doing it. Just because the movie came out a long time ago, or our first book came out a long time ago, like helping people and working with kids and working, with in difficult neighborhoods and difficult situations, that never gets old. That's never going to go away. So the we just keep doing it. We keep doing it, and we keep working with kids, and it feels pretty special, because even to this day, somebody will ask, well, what do you do, or something, and I'll start to describe the foundation, or I'll start to describe the story, and then they go, wait, like the Freedom Riders? And I'm like, yeah, actually, yeah, it is the Freedom Riders. I'm one of the Freedom Riders. They're like, what? Like you? I'm like, yeah, like we're real people. I'm the kid grown up, So it just feels pretty special. It feels like a legacy.
I love that we have so many members of our family from different countries, different religious backgrounds. But often I've heard you say at the end of a really special day, you've been in a classroom with kids, you've been on a stage in a theater, you've filled up an entire auditorium. You'll end the day by saying, "Today I feel like I did God's work." And I say that because for you and the freedom riders that are joining us, it is bigger than yourself. And I think it is a calling. So what does that mean? Knowing that we represent so many people who may pray differently than you, but what does it mean when you have those moments of divinity, those moments where it does feel bigger than yourself?
Yeah, because you never know, you never. I feel like, I'm not a teacher, right? But sometimes I feel like a teacher, like an educator, and I feel like most educators feel like sometimes you're talking to the kids, or you're talking to somebody, you get that blank stare, and then a couple of years later, that kid comes back and goes, "Oh, you were my favorite. You were the best. You changed my life." Blah blah blah. And you're like, "Really? I thought you weren't paying attention." And just, you never know how you're going to affect somebody, and you never know like which little moment is going to hit, and sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's hard going there, talking about our personal lives, or you're having a rough day, and you still have to, you still have to be there. You still have to, like you said, do God's work and do good stuff, because you never know when that moment is going to be, what's going to happen. And it's funny because sometimes we'll go, we'll do an event, we'll work with 50 kids or 100 kids or whatever, and then it's time to go, and there's always that one kid that sticks around, or those two kids that stick around, and they have a question, and it's that question that hits them deep, that they just can't talk about in front of everybody. And those are those little moments, where you can have a conversation with somebody, and hopefully, acknowledge them, and let them know that they're seen.
I love that Bill Fever, Silver Fox himself, just left a message in our chat room about changing the world one student at a time. And I want to give him kudos. He was the first Freedom Rider teacher that I met in Fresno, California, at an event, and he was holding onto your book, Tony. And he got there early, as teachers are apt to do. And in Bill Fever's copy of the newly published Friedemar's Diary, he had underlined words. He had dog-eared pages. He had little stickies on the side. And I remember seeing this amazing man with our book, and he had done to our book, your book, the Freedom Writers book, what I had done to J.D. Salinger or Anne Frank or any of the books that I used in my treasure trove. And come to find out, Bill Fever, now a celebrated educator, since retired, but he was one of the most acclaimed educators in his community because he listened. He leaned in and he learned. And I love that, he worked with young men and women in juvenile halls. And there's a beautiful young woman that he's been sharing with me over the years that is working on her PhD. To go from knowing her when she was incarcerated to working on her doctorate. It's a testament to legacies, and one student at a time, one person at a time. So what is it like for you that your book made its way into the hands of Bill Fever, who then took your book into a juvenile hall and for the better part of forever was teaching your words to kids, with the idea that you don't have to come back and spend the rest of your life behind bars. You can go out and use education and your voice to change.
So those are the books I like to see, by the way. Those 10-year-old beat up dog-eared, books. I love when I see kids coming up with that book, and it's all scruffled and, you can tell they've read it a dozen times. I love it. That's my favorite. Those are because I'm like, okay, that's the book that has seen some use. The kids in juvenile hall and prisons and stuff. I feel like a lot of these kids, if they just had a little more love and attention, they wouldn't be there. And I feel like they think that people don't care about them. When somebody does care about them and comes in, like they just take that in, man. They take that in and they love it and they run with it. The times that we have gone into juvenile halls, I remember what I get the most is, or what sticks the most in my mind is, when kids say like, man, why are you here? Like you guys, you guys just came to see us. Like that's, we're like, yeah, man, because you're special. Like you deserve it. And they can't believe that somebody, who's a professional or who cares or somebody that's important is going to see them, because they think of anybody, who's in the educational field or, who does good work or something like that as an important person. So to them, like somebody that's an important person to be there just for them is like, it blows their mind. They can't believe it because they're not used to it.
Now, speaking of important people, I want to do some shout outs because it is Giving Tuesday. I just got a note that Daniel Johnson, our beloved Freedom Writer teacher in Memphis, Tennessee, donated $30 for Giving Tuesday, 30 for 30. And one of you who wants to remain anonymous also donated not just $31 for the processing fee. So thank you for those special people who are watching and feeling the spirit to give and to give of themselves and their time so that we can all pay it forward. So Tony, I want to show some clips. We prepared some clips for our audience to kind of give some behind the scenes looks at our story. And we selected one of my favorite moments of the documentary that is gritty and raw. And it was from our, I feel kind of silly saying this, but our Emmy award-winning documentary, no less. And then we're going to show two of our favorite clips from the feature film. And you and I are going to give some background story and some context while you are watching, while you are learning. Drag your friends, drag your colleagues, your students, your family to watch as well. And if you are inspired, please feel free to give on Giving Tuesday. But in honor of Bill Fever, in honor of our silver fox, in honor of this gentleman who dedicated his time day after day for decades to these young students in a juvenile hall, the scene that I chose, not knowing that Bill specifically would be on the call, I just knew that he had given to our cause a few days ago. There was a moment that I thought would be beautiful for you and I to bring to life, Tony, and it's the origin story. It's the city in which you lived, the city in which I now live, prior to Room 203, prior to that 30 for 30 moment. And in this part of the documentary, it's very gritty. What you as the viewer are going to see, and Tony as the young person living in Long Beach lived, was the grit. So I want to set it up. We're going to watch it, and then Tony, I want to put some context to what it was like before you walked into Room 203. So in this particular scene, it's the beginning of our documentary. It shows the layers of Long Beach in 1992, when the Los Angeles riot happened, the racial reckoning following the Rodney King verdict, and the year leading up to my class. And in that chasm between the riot and students entering Room 203, there was 126 homicides. So I want to throw that out. That's a horrific number when you think about young boys like Tony going to funerals, young boys like Tony losing nephews and neighbors, young boys like Tony looking over his shoulder and wondering, am I going to make it home alive? So I think it's really important for us to see the city in which I inherited as a teacher. And I think it's really important for us to understand that grit, because when we go to cities and we talk to students, one of the most important things that we do is we learn everything we can about the city, everything we can about the school, everything that students that we're going to speak to see before they walk into that room or that auditorium. So I think context is everything. So for the next few moments, I want to take you back to Long Beach 30 years ago, when it was gritty and edgy and scary. And some of these images, you'll actually hear voices of freedom riders you may know. My hope is that as you watch that scene, you'll have a lot of compassion for Tony, who decided to go to school, made a choice to show up and be present, made a decision to put down a fist and pick up a pen that led to him being on the cover of a book. So let's check out the city in which Tony lived 30 years ago, before our story began.
I could die today. God damn, I could die today. For nothing. For nothing. For being in this car and being at the stoplight at the wrong time. I could die today for nothing. I could die for the chain on my neck. I could die for the earrings in my ear. I could die for the money that's not even in my pocket. I could die today.
The Freedom Rider story began in April of 1992. The Rodney King verdict had just been announced. I was in my early 20s. At that time, I was living in Newport Beach, this safe, idyllic seaside community. And I turned on my television, and just 30 minutes from where I lived, people were looting, there were riots.
The skies of Los Angeles are black with smoke from at least 150 fires deliberately set.
Thousands of people went on a rampage, a riot, still angry about the verdict in the Rodney King beating trial.
One of the things that really concerned me was seeing children. It made me realize that children, they listen and they watch, and adults become these role models. watching that unfold and seeing those teenagers and seeing that angst and that anger, something happened. And I realized I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher in an area where those young people that were so angry were doing what I saw on television. I guess I believe the cliche that education can equalize a very unfair playing field. So I chose to teach English at Wilson High in Long Beach.
So Tony, that's pretty gritty. And I love that we have some of our family members that are also in the throes of the grit right now. Jill and Amnon have just joined us from Israel. And so our hearts and our prayers are with both of you. And so for you as a young teenager, the world was not watching as this was unfolding on the streets that you lived on. We could turn on our televisions now and we have such solidarity with our brothers and sisters who are in the Middle East. And, a lot of freedom riders told me about that 92, 93 years. You felt that you were invisible. You felt that if there was someone who was lost, that you did not read about them in a newspaper or see them on the nightly news. They were just a nameless, faceless person in an undeclared war. So I'd love for you to put a little context on what that was like for you as a teenage boy before you were in my class at Wilson High School to see what our viewers just saw, that grit, that angst, and the anger that came from justice not being served in a community who so desperately deserved justice to be served.
Yeah. So first thing I think to say is that the city was very segregated, and so you had to learn where you could walk, where you couldn't walk. I remember first day of high school. I lived on the east side. I lived on like 21st and Atlantic. So the closest school to my house was Poly, right, where Snoop Dogg went. And I lived, 3 blocks away from Snoop Dogg. So that's the school that they sent me to. And so I had to go to that school to let them know that I couldn't go there, right? And so on my way to school, I got jumped, right? I got beat up. And I got jumped. I didn't get beat up. There's a difference. Getting beat up is you lose a fight. Getting jumped is 3 dudes pounding on you, right? There's a big difference. So I show up to the counselor and they say, like, I can't come here, and the counselor's like, why not? And I'm like, because of this black guy, right? And then I told the counselor, like, well, I can't come here because I'm Mexican. And then she's like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm like, this isn't a Mexican school. I can't come here. Like, do you not understand? Like, this is a Black and Asian school. I need to either go to a neutral school or to a Mexican school, right? So that was the reality that we were living in. And so that's how I ended up getting bused to Wilson, because Wilson was supposedly like a neutral school.
I'm going to stop you there for a moment, Tony. I think that we as educators, we want to believe that there is equity and inclusion and equality in our schools. And I think what you're saying is a secret that didn't make its way into my teacher classes at a university. Because, years ago, Brown versus Board of Education was a Supreme Court decision that said separate is never equal. And so integration was supposed to be something that was supposed to happen in schools, specifically in communities that had a very large racial community of different backgrounds and cultures. And what you're saying is in the city of Long Beach, that at that time that had 5 very large comprehensive high schools, that it became sort of an educational apartheid, that in certain schools, the kids, not the teachers, but the kids knew this is the school that I can go, and this is probably the school I should not go to.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's important for teachers to know, that you kids have like a PhD of the streets. Would you agree?
Absolutely. My black guy knew which school I could go to and which one I couldn't,
I don't know if you know, Tony, but one of our band of brothers, Melvin Logan, has joined us. He's going to be part of our live series this afternoon at 6 p.m. Pacific. And And I have loved when you and Melvin have stood side by side, toe to toe, knee to knee, speaking to students in schools now who have had racial reckonings. Um, Recently, we've worked with a group of kids who had the same issues with Black and brown boys, feeling like they were marking their territory. And instead of being suspended and expelled after there was a fight, you and Melvin stepped in and said, as we're brothers from other mothers, let us corral these boys. Let us talk to these young men because we lived it. So when you knew those young men because you lived it, what is it that you lived?
It was that segregation that our community had built, because when I was used to living in the Mexican neighborhood. I was used to going to my Mexican schools. So when I walked into that classroom, I immediately sat at the Mexican table, and we all divided ourselves like that automatically because we thought that was safe, And what's funny is I had nothing in common with those kids. Like I always say, like, I was a rocker kid. I had long hair, I played the guitar. Like I had nothing in common with the kids at that table, except the color of our skin, and it wasn't until we got to know each other that I realized that, my brothers were spread all across the room, and then we started, coming together based on struggle and on what we had to overcome, as opposed to, something as trivial as the color of our skin. I had more in common with an Asian kid whose dad was also an alcoholic, whose mom also had to, have 3 jobs to help run the family, who stunk up the house when she cooked fish. You know what I mean? That was my life. It was just coming out of an Asian kid, So it turned out, there were so many other people that I can relate to that didn't look like me, but it took a while to get there.
Well, I think we have a lot of gratitude that we can offer to Melvin, who ironically is watching right now and will be joining us this afternoon. As you all know, it's our 30 for 30 on Giving Tuesday. And I just got another update. Sweet Brianna Rodriguez, who is our sister in Long Island, New York, just donated $30. We love you, Brianna. And we're sending hugs to you and your dad, David, and your mom, Nancy. We will see you at our symposium in March. So thank you for the donation. Bill Fever, the Silver Fox, who already donated again. And he's now in for 100. So thank you, Bill Fever, for your second donation. Unbelievable. But while we have Melvin, who is watching you, Tony, at his desk, getting ready for his comments this afternoon at 6 p.m. Pacific, what I want to say to you is we have a lot of gratitude to pay forward to Melvin, unbeknownst to him, because of a pen and a piece of paper and a caricature that he drew that made its way around my class. And I don't think any of us then realized that 30 years later that we would be sitting here speaking of that moment. And I think it's funny when you and I are with Melvin loves to like out our age. He always like out the down. I try to pretend that I'm a teenager and I'm cool. Clearly I'm not. I have the gray hairs to prove that I'm not. But I love that. And Melvin is always trying to out our ages. But I guess you can out our ages when you put 2 and 2 together that this happened 30 years ago. And so what I want to do is we're going to show some context. And then on the other side of this clip, I want you to talk about being the beneficiary of what Melvin did. Later today, we'll hear from Carlos, who passed the note. We'll hear from Melvin this afternoon about drawing the note. But you were the beneficiary, Tony. You were the beneficiary of that note. And like you just said, in this community that had educational apartheid, we had to come together and we had to lean in and love and see past something. I'm glad that you said it, not me, that the triviality of skin color. because at that time it was anything but trivial. It was a do or die. You know, you with your PhD of the streets knew what sides of the street you could and could not navigate. You knew what it was like to bury friends. And so what I want to do is I want to set up the scene, and then you're going to talk about being the recipient of that moment. So I was clueless. I was naive. I was brand new. I think at this point, I was not even getting paid yet. I was still in graduate school, and this was part of my my penance to get my teaching credentials. I was finishing my master's and simultaneously getting my teaching credential. And on day one, the co-teacher that I was teaching with decided, peace out, deuces, I'm out. And he left me alone with a group of teenage students who were angry at me, angry at school, angry at the world, angry at the school to prison pipeline. And then something happened. And unbeknownst to me now, Melvin was actually trying to show me that chivalry lives, because Melvin, ironically, was standing up for me. Sherrod had been what Sherrod had been often, which was the first one picked on and always the last one picked. So unbeknownst to me, Melvin was trying to show that chivalry lives, Miss G. I'm going to stand up for you. I'm going to draw this note, and I'm going to put Sherrod in his place. As you mentioned earlier, Tony, Sherrod actually went to the school that was not in his neighborhood. He came from the Carmelitas Housing Project. So Pauley was not the school in his district. He had chosen to go to Pauley because of the legacy of their football, because it was predominantly an African-American school, and they kicked Sherrod out because Sherrod had brought a gun to school. Lo and behold, I'm the next English teacher on his school schedule. And so this moment could have been very explosive. This moment could have led to not just Sherrod, but Melvin and Carlos being suspended, being expelled, being sent away. So what I have loved about the feature film is the intricacy into the details they tried to get right. And this is one of those scenes. Boy, oh boy, did they get it right. You know, the classroom was to spec. It looked like my class. I think, Tony, some of you actually went to the Paramount set and drew graffiti on the desk. So the graffiti was pretty right on. So they created my class. We found young people who look like you and Melvin and Sherrod and Carlos to become a part of this moment. And then Hilary Swank, with her pearls, loses her mind, as I did, became Medusa. And in that moment, everything had to stop so that we could start over. So let's check out this scene. And on the other end, Tony, I'd love to talk about what it has meant since. And if you're watching the scene and you're feeling inspired, please feel free to donate to our 30 for 30. If you're inspired to send Tony a sweet note, as Melvin is doing in the chat room, which I love. And Tony, once the clip is playing, you actually can read all those sweet notes that Melvin is sending to you right now. So let's check out this scene that was recreated so beautifully in my class. And if you were inspired to give, please do so. I'd love to give a shout out to anyone that gives in real time during this hour. So let's go into room 203 with Hilary Swank, and let's recreate that moment that Melvin was the catalyst for.
I don't have page 4. That's run out.
Okay, why don't you just use the next blank page? What's going on? What is that? Give it to me. What is this?
Just leave it alone.
You think this is funny? Tito, would this be funny? funny if it were a picture of you?
It ain't.
Close the workbooks. Maybe we should talk about art. Tito's got real talent, don't you think? You know something? I saw a picture just like this once in a museum. Only it wasn't a black man. It was a Jewish man. And instead of the big lips, he had a really big nose, like a rat's nose. But he wasn't just one particular Jewish man. This was a drawing of all Jews. And these drawings were put in the newspapers by the most famous gang in history. You think you know all about gangs? You're amateurs. This gang would put you all to shame. And they started out poor and angry, and everybody looked down on them until one man decided to give them some pride, an identity, and somebody to blame. Take over neighborhoods? That's nothing compared to them. They took over countries. You want to know how? They just wiped out everybody else. Yeah, they wiped out everybody they didn't like and everybody they blamed for their life being hard. And one of the ways they did it was by doing this. See, they'd print pictures like this in the newspapers. Jewish people with big, long noses. Blacks with big, fat lips. They'd also publish scientific evidence that proved Jews and blacks were the lowest form of human species. Jews and blacks were more like animals. And because they were just like animals, it didn't really matter whether they lived or died. In fact, life would be a whole lot better if they were all dead. That's how a Holocaust happens. You're raising your hand?
The thing that you said before. The Holocaust?
Holocaust, yes.
What is that?
Raise your hand if you know what the Holocaust is. Raise your hand if anyone in this classroom has ever been shot at.
No, for those that watch the movie, it's a shocking scene. I think the most shocking is the raising of the hands. And you have seen that along with Melvin and Carlos and freedom riders in our classrooms, not just students raising their hands, but standing beside you when we play the line game, answering some of the most difficult questions. So before we go into that moment, I do want to do a shout out to Melvin, who was in the chat room, who wanted to say something very sweet to Brianna Rodriguez. He said, "Can you feel that, Brianna? That's me hugging you." So Brianna, wherever you may be today, I hope that you can feel Melvin's hugs for your donation and for joining us. The other thing I want to do a sweet shout out. Freedom Riders love telling their stories. And I want to thank Michael Ozier, who just donated a whopping $511. Oh my goodness. We spent several days with Michael Ozier in his hometown of Rochester, New York. We even got to see his childhood home, the hill where he used to sled in snowstorms, his synagogue, spend time with his family and friends. It was amazing. But before we went to Rochester, Michael Ozier is part of Toastmasters, and Toastmasters adopted the Freedom Riders and allowed Freedom Riders to learn how to public speak. So now we're very conscious of our ums and ahs. Sorry, Michael, if you're counting, but you gave us that confidence and that ability to realize that anyone can be a storyteller. And Freedom Riders started as storytellers in my class. Then they became storytellers with our book, and now they're storytellers in classrooms. And so, as a storyteller, Tony, what is it like when we show that very scene in an auditorium or a class, and then we ask students to respond? Stand on the line if you have lost somebody to gang violence. Stand on the line if you have ever been in harm's way. And time after time after time, you and Melvin are standing next to young men and women who have very similar stories, not just here in Long Beach, California, but the same kids in Rochester, New York, who also felt that they went to a very segregated school, could and would stand beside you if you were there. So what is that like for you when you show that scene, kids are feeling very emotional, and then they stand and they look at you and they nod and there's that acknowledgement?
It's it's very powerful because I think most kids that are going through something traumatic like that they shouldn't be going through, like losing a loved one, they sometimes feel like they're the only ones. And I think we all felt like that. And anytime we went through something major, we thought that it was just us and we were alone. And it wasn't until like we played the line game and until we wrote this stuff down that we can kind of, compare notes and talk to each other and say, hey man, I lost somebody too. Let's talk about it, And for these kids, sometimes they're just kind of suffering in silence. So when we do have the opportunity to play like a game like the line game, and they walk up, and I think it makes them feel a little better. It makes them feel seen, especially when we walk up there with them. I love when we play the game and like I keep walking up, to every single question, and then they look like, really? And I'm like, yeah, dog. Like, yep. I've been there, man. Lost somebody, been homeless, like had my power cut off, like what, name it. I'm there. I'm right there with you, And so I think it makes them feel like it can be okay. Like they can get through it.
One of the beautiful things when we were in Rochester with Michael Osher, we went to a high school, East High in Rochester, and we got to meet these beautiful students. And Michael Osher and his sister were so inspired by how honest and earnest these kids were that they literally bought every single kid that we met that day a book. And Tony, it was like they were getting a Cartier watch. They were getting a Gucci bag. They were getting something that was a designer. And I want you to say thank you to the Michael Oshers of the world who do pay books forward, because you get to sign those books. And what is it like for you when you get to sign this brand new book for a kid, and it's not a homework assignment? It's not part of a spelling bee or an essay, but they get to like take it away and it is theirs. What is that like for you?
I love it. I love it. Not just because it's our book and not just because we wrote it and not just because we wrote it for kids, but because I feel like we get to be the witness of kids having that like aha moment where they realize what education really is, what learning really is, what reading really is, And I feel like a lot of us, growing up the way we did, we couldn't make that connection. We didn't have that connection. We didn't understand why we went to school, why we read, why we learned. I try to compare it to like trying to make the basketball team. I always tell the kids, if you want to make the basketball team, you got to practice. You can't just show up and make the basketball team. I'm like, that's what you're doing here. You're practicing, right? But sometimes like we didn't get it, because we didn't have those examples. We didn't have like, for some people, if they want to see what success can be, all they got to do is look at their parents and they say, oh, okay, my parents did X, Y, and Z. They went to college, they got a degree, and now this is why I have a nice house. This is why they have nice cars. This is why my lights don't get cut off. But for some of us, it was the opposite, And so when kids have that aha moment, like, wow, like there's something important in my life, and it's not like on a screen. It's something in written words. It's something that somebody wrote a long time for me, and they're excited about it. That's my favorite. You can almost see it. You can almost see their mind changing. It's the best.
Well, for the price of like 2 books, a Freedom Writer's Diary cost $18 to $20 with tax. And so on our 30 for 30, you could pay it forward to us. You could buy a book and pay it forward to a kid. Today is really about, as we like to say, radical giving. So if you are watching and you feel inspired to radically give, so many of the folks have already given. You can give as well. So I want to show one more clip, and I want to challenge you, Tony. At the beginning of our conversation, you said, "I'm not a teacher," and technically, air quotes, technically you don't have your teaching credential. That is true. But I think that we have learned in the Talmud that whoso saves a life saves the world entire. And oftentimes you are that teacher that is saving a singular life, that is saving the world entire. And what I mean by that is you got to meet some pretty amazing teachers who didn't graduate from high school, who didn't have the luxury of going to college, because when they were your age as teenagers, they were put into cattle cars, rode into Auschwitz-Birkenau, and faced the most horrific period of history. And they became your teachers. And I believe that if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. So you got to go to a primary source. You got to have these amazing Holocaust survivors, because of that note, because of that moment in my class, take you and your classmates through the museum, and they were your docents, and they got to fill in the backstory. And so I'd love to do is to show this beautiful scene. We went to the Museum of Tolerance 30 years ago, and we've gone every year since in the last 30 years. We consider ourselves proud partners with the Museum of Tolerance. I'd love to show this scene. The 3 Holocaust survivors you're going to see, they are all Holocaust survivors. They're not actors and actresses. Of those 3, we lost Eddie a few years ago, but Renee is 99 years old. In fact, on April 13th, she'll be 100. Gloria, I believe, is 97, and Elizabeth Mon is 98. They are the prettiest girls in every room. And on that very day, they were Tony's teachers. And now Tony gets to take that baton and pay it forward. So let's check out that scene from the Museum of Tolerance and talk about the power of that moment of learning from somebody that might not be technically a teacher, but the lessons they teach are sometimes far more important.
At the beginning of the tour, they give you a card with the child's picture on it. You can find out who they were and what camp they were sent to. And at the end of the tour, you can find out that they survived. I got a little girl from Italy.
Kristallnacht, they called it, the night of broken glass. Hundreds of synagogues looted and burned, more than 7,000 Jewish stores destroyed, over 100 Jews killed, thousands more.
Soul Center for Children in Lisieux, in the French province of Ain. Among the children deported that day to Birkenau was was 11-year-old Liliane Berenstein, who before leaving left behind a letter to God.
My little boy died. He got off the train and they killed him. I don't know why it bothered me so much. I've seen death all my life. But this little boy was only 5.
Miss G had a beautiful dinner for us at the hotel where she works. She invited real Holocaust survivors from the museum to meet us. There was Elizabeth Mann.
I had my parents, my sister, my 2 brothers.
Gloria Angar.
If any of you have seen someone with a number on their arm, these were the lucky people, the people who, when we came to Auschwitz, when they tattooed the people, they took us to do the slave work. Not the others, and that included many of my family.
Some of the young kids, I was at that time 11 and a half years old.
Addie Elan.
And where to go, I didn't know, but I remember one place where I used to live. So when I ran there was not one Jew left.
I was in the worst camp. I was in Auschwitz.
And Renee Firestone.
When I arrived, my parents were immediately taken away from me. My little sister, who was then 14 years old, stayed with me for a little while. And then later on, I was separated from her also.
She lost her whole family at the camps.
If you saw the film.
She came to this country with $4 in her pocket and a newborn baby. I'll never forget these people.
And then she was killed because they didn't want to send her.
I can't believe Miss G did all of this for us.
So that moment was really powerful, Tony. And for all of you that are watching on Facebook, thank you. There was a technicality on YouTube, so our apologies. Switch on over to Facebook if you've lost the connection. During that clip, Tony, we got some other donations. So I'm going to ask you a question after I do an amazing shout out. I want to do a shout out to Carlos, our Carlos. Carlos donated 30 and made a commitment that he's going to donate 30 to our 9 o'clock hour, our 3 p.m. hour, and our 6 p.m. hour. And he's going to be joining us at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So thank you, Carlos, because she's one of the most brilliant people I know. Freedom Rider Dulce just donated over $100. Tony, amazing. And so unbelievably generous. Thank you, Dulce. Deborah Fernandez also donated $30 for our 30 for 30 campaign. So I love that scene inspired some folks to give. And Tony, in the spirit of giving, I want to put Renee's face on the screen. I saw Renee, all 99 years young, a couple weeks ago at the Museum of Tolerance. And to be 99 years old, to still be telling her story. 99, she's not as quick and not as lucid, but I can't wait to celebrate her 100th birthday. So show sweet little Renee on the screen now. This was just a couple weeks ago. Renee was with us at the Museum of Tolerance. And as we're pulling up Renee, there she is. There's my girl. She's standing beside a picture of herself at the Museum of Tolerance, 99 years young. And for 30 years, Tony, she has been your teacher. For 30 years, she's been your docent. For 30 years, she has come to every single one of our holiday parties. For 30 years, she's been helping us teach teachers. And just recently, you were part of the team captains taking soon-to-be minted Freedom Rider teachers to the museum. So what has it been like for you to continue to go to the Museum of Tolerance for 30 years?
Well, it's incredible. Originally, I think one of the things that drew us so much to these survivors is like, first of all, they have this incredible strength. and they're just so willing to tell their story and to share their experiences and their struggle and everything. And I think it helped us to put our lives in perspective when we see people that have gone through so much and can remain so positive and so strong and so willing to spread the message and make sure it doesn't happen again. And the fact that we've been going to the Museum of Tolerance for so long, and we always get invited, we have a partnership with them. It's amazing. I always like to say that one of my biggest accomplishments in the world is that when you go through the Museum of Tolerance, they have a section that says, good people and good organizations, continuing the fight, and our picture is up there. Just to be, to have a small picture up, next to those giants is incredible. And talking to Renee, like it's you hear this story, and you see these heroes, but whenever you call them heroes, or you say, what gave you the strength to do this, or how could you, how could you have kept going? She would always say, it was just the right thing to do. She's like, you just kept moving forward, and it was the right thing to do. And that's it. It's as simple as that, and that, I think that's what makes it so incredible, is that she would never call herself a hero, and on the contrary, like, she's so humble, and just that desire to pay it forward to the next generation is incredible.
Well, I think it's foreshadowing, because Renee has been telling her story since she was liberated from Auschwitz in 1945. She's 99 years young, Tony. That means you're going to be telling your story, your legacy, till you were 99 years young. People never tire of hearing from Renee and other survivors. I hope and pray that people never tire of hearing about you and your former classmates, the Freedom Riders. So one of the things I'd love to ask all of you, if you live in Southern California, on Sunday, February 18th, we are doing a partnership with the Museum of Tolerance for free. Freedom Riders and their families. So yes, Freedom Riders and their sons and daughters, husbands and wives, sweetie pies and all. We, along with teachers, are going to the Museum of Tolerance, and it is going to be sponsored by the Museum of Tolerance. So it is free of cost. The museum will be showing several of their most incredible exhibits, the Holocaust Museum section, the Anne Frank exhibit. And then at 2:00, we are going to be doing a live screening of our feature film and a Q&A afterwards. So if you have not been, if you'd like to come with us and have your sons, daughters, or students watch Freedom Riders on a stage telling their story, we'd love to invite you. And I'm hopeful that we can get Renee Firestone to join us as well on that day. So as we come to a close, we've had an amazing hour. Many of you have donated. Some of you will continue to donate to our 30 for 30 cause. My homework assignment is simple. We're going to do this 2 more times today. We're trying to get all of the different time zones in which we humbly serve. So I'm thrilled that Jill and Amnon joined us. It is 10 hours ahead in Tel Aviv, and they joined us on our 9:00 call. Our 3:00 Pacific Standard Time today will be geared towards all of those fine folks on the East Coast and Central Time who have finished their school day. And for all of you folks on the West Coast, we're going to be doing a 6 p.m. as well. Carlos will be joining me at 3 p.m. Melvin will be joining me at 6 p.m. Tony, even if they showed up to see you, why should they come back? Why should they go and tell their friends or students to come back at a different time today to hear different anecdotes and different stories?
Because it's a great story, and Melvin and Carlos are going to give their perspective on it and their side of it. Because I feel like we all have little insights. Like in the book, Melvin says that he was the bully. I don't believe that for a second. I never thought he was the bully. I actually thought Sherrod was the bully, and Melvin was the one trying to calm him down. So there's different sides to it, but yeah, I can't wait to hear them speak.
And I think we've learned in our studies, there's oftentimes bully, the bullied, and a perpetrator. So and the bystander. So oftentimes people who were bullied become the bully.
Mhm.
Oftentimes people who are the bystanders can make a choice to stand up and speak out. And so I love that they will hear different perspectives of the catalyst of today, which is our 30 for 30. So Tony, I cannot thank you enough for getting up at the crack of dawn. Tony no longer lives in Long Beach, and he was so committed to our different time zones that Tony got up at 5 a.m. to drive into the office today to share his story. That smile lights up a screen, and you can see his beautiful face on the cover of any version of the Freedom Writers Diary you may have. We're now in our 20th anniversary edition. So we thank you for spending an hour with us. We thank you for donating your time and your treasure. And we thank you for being part of our Freedom Writer family. And my plea is invite somebody to join us later today. Send them a text or an email. Invite them to come and spend the day with us. We're also going to do a wonderful year in review on December 20th. So come back again and hear more stories from the Freedom Writer family. And once again, thank you. We have such gratitude and grace for every single one of you that has been interested, involved, and inclusive in our incredible journey. So thank you for giving. Continue to radically give on this global day, Giving Tuesday. We'll see you this afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.